All right, so we've come to the last talk of the day. Actually, we're going to do the last talk, and then I'm going to have just a few more things about the party and stuff after that. But that's a sad moment. But at least we've got another full day, and we've got a party to look forward to after that. So that's good. So the next speaker, the last speaker, is Jeff Atwood. Jeff is going to be talking about community, which he knows a lot about since he co-founded Stack Overflow and now Discourse. And actually, just a personal anecdote that he probably has no idea of. I'd been writing a blog for maybe 2 months. I started it because I thought, why? I was inspired by other people who were doing it, and I thought I would start getting involved, and maybe a couple people would read. And I remember writing a post, and I think it was something about people who not being ashamed of your code as a new developer, which I was at the time, and trying to provide encouragement, mostly for me, but for other people too. And Jeff, I remember vividly that Coding Horror reached out and tweeted about it, and then contacted me, and we discussed over email some of the stuff, and it was just a big thing for me as a young person just trying to get involved in the community, that somebody was reaching out to this nobody to talk about stuff. So he's probably got a lot to share on this. So thank you very much, Jeff.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So I am a local. I actually came across the bay to get here, so I didn't have to come very far to get here. But if you know who I am, you might know about me through my blog, which was mentioned earlier. I've been running this blog since 2004. And the blog was an interesting experience for me because it became so popular that it kind of overshadowed my regular day job by about 2007. And when I turned RSS on, back when RSS was a thing, I had 40,000 subscribers. And I was like, wow, this is like a small city of people listening to me talk about this stuff. And I was really amazed. And I thought I had this responsibility. These people, I've built this community accidentally around just putting words on the internet, which was amazing in and of itself. But then what I started thinking about was, what do I do with this ball of energy, right? I've been given this ball of energy, and I want to do something with it, but I just don't know what it is. And working in my day job started to seem very quaint because I would affect maybe 10, 20 people, or I could write something on my blog that 40, 50,000 people would read and see and respond to. So I started reaching out to people in the community that I respected, that I knew, and one of the people I reached out to was Joel Spolsky in New York. And I told him, I said, I have this blog, I have a lot of people paying attention to me, and I want to do something. But I don't know what it is. I don't know what to do. I have this ball of energy, and I want to do something good with it. And he had a great idea, which was there was this site, Experts Exchange, which has a very convenient dash in the middle of it. And it was a site that programmers used to get answers to questions, but it was just a terrible experience. So his idea was essentially, we could do something like that, but without all the evil. And I said, wow, that sounds really good because I have this community. I love community. I've seen the positive things we can do together, and we started piecing together this Frankenstein monster of, we want to achieve certain things with this site. We want it to be a place where programmers can go and learn, but not argue, because I don't know if you know any programmers, but they love to argue, and they're very good at rules lawyering because they spend all day thinking about these very complicated rule sets. So we handpicked these behaviors of okay, what's working? Wikipedia is working, Reddit is working, blogs are working, my blog was working, and we know forums work to some extent. People go there. So we want to combine all the things that we knew were working into this Frankenstein monster that eventually became Stack Overflow in 2008. Thank you. Thanks. I just want to note that applause really should be for you guys, because the work done on that site is you. We facilitate, but you're the ones putting in all the energy into the site. So thank you. And that site was extremely popular, but we did have to explain it to people, because as we started building the site, we realized, okay, like everything else, we didn't really know what we were doing. We had ideas, we had plans, but no plan survives contact with users, right? So we were sort of figuring it out as we went, and we eventually figured out a number of things, and they built this really cool tutorial. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's after I left, but they did a great job on it, and it explains what Stack Overflow is and how it works. And the main thing to get away from it is that it's really Q&A. It's not a discussion, and that's what we're trying to make clear, the minute you get the page, is this is not a place to discuss stuff. This is a place to ask questions or answer questions. And it's kind of at the top of that text on the previous page, but it says, this is not a discussion. We're not here to have chit-chat. This is really just Q&A. And the other big feature of the system was this power of putting a number next to someone's name. I knew how powerful this was. I was a little scared of it because I knew how powerful it was. And all the reputation in Stack Overflow comes from other peers. It doesn't come from us, the system. It comes from your peers acknowledging, hey, that made sense, or hey, that worked for me, or hey, that was a really good question or a really good answer. And as people give you these peer votes, your reputation goes up, right? And as your reputation goes up, you unlock privileges to sort of help run the site to some degree. And it gets actually very complicated, as you'll see. So going on, we also have a badging system where one of my central theses on Stack Overflow was that nobody wants to read the manual. Reading the manual is boring. What they want to do is start using the software. So how do you get people to do stuff? Well, I was thinking in terms of video games. Nobody opens a video game manual, right? You just install the game and you start playing. And as it turns out, the first level is a tutorial. They don't say, this is a tutorial. But wow, how convenient. There's just one bad guy there. How easy it would be to take that bad guy out. So badges are kind of like that. They're like little side quests you can go on that teach you things about how Stack Overflow works and what you should be doing to get the best results for yourself and for the community. And there's tons of these badges, and they work really well. And there's also just a slew of numbers, right? Like once you start in the system, it's like numbers, 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 right? Like not just on your name, but every question has a number, every answer has a number. There's how many tags there are. You can graph your reputation, as you can see here, and you can see where you're getting reputation from in the system. And beyond that, there's not just the Stack Overflow system, there's also Stack sites for things like bicycling. There's a cooking site. There's an English language site. You can see here the accounts. You can play this system on multiple sites and have a very similar experience on very different topics. There's also a bounty system. Can anyone raise their hand if they actually won a bounty on Stack Overflow? One person? So the point I'm making there is there's different levels to play the game at. This is an advanced system for people who want more. There's a daily cap on reputation because we don't want you to spend all your time on Stack Overflow. We want you to spend your time programming, right? And to some extent, spending too much time on Stack Overflow becomes a negative, as I'll explain to you. So the bounty system is a way to say, look, I am a very advanced user. I want to get as much reputation as possible, so I'm going to seek out these bounties. Or maybe you have a really hard question you can't get an answer to, so you would put a bounty on the question. Say, hey, I really need an answer that's good, so I'm going to give extra bonus reputation to the answer that I like the most to my question. So as you can see, the point I'm trying to make here is this game gets really complicated. Right? Numbers, numbers everywhere, and there's a lot of concepts, there's a lot of things flying at you. But this is what programmers do. Like, we love these rule sets. We spend all day thinking about 50 different rule sets that are all interlocking like this very complicated watch to make this thing run. And this is where we're very, very comfortable for a variety of reasons. And if you go back historically, you think of how I started as a programmer and how many programmers start, it's because we started with games. We played games. We thought, hey, it's cool to play the game. What if we made a game? And that was sort of our introduction to programming. And today, I think for a lot of people, or a lot of kids, this is really Minecraft. Minecraft is how they learn to program, and it's a very similar kind of experience. But the real focus of the system, the more we got deeper into it, the more I learned is that it's about learning, and learning should be fun. The game is a structure around the learning so that everybody is learning and working towards that common goal of getting better at your job, getting just an answer to your question, or really just moving programming forward as, a discipline. And people got addicted. If you do searches for Stack Overflow addiction, this was a huge thing, and it really surprised me. I mean, I did not intend for it to be, this is why we have the rep cap, for example, which wasn't always popular, was the idea that, you're not really supposed to be spending all your time on Stack Overflow, but it is a great place to learn stuff, everything in moderation. So we built a Q&A game, and the Q&A game starts with the problem. This is a very important point. There's always a problem. You cannot go to Stack Overflow, and let me just go to Stack Overflow and post, hey, let me tell you guys about my day that I had today. We're like, don't care. What's your problem, right? Like, what problem are you giving us to work on, right? And all answers are not supposed to be discussions. They're supposed to be directed looking up towards the question. This is an answer. This is another alternative answer. There can be 5 answers. There could be 10 answers. But when you start getting to 100 answers, you start saying, wow, there's 100 answers. This starts feeling a lot less like a Q&A and like something else. But the coolest thing about the system, and one of the things that I love about it, is people got it, that we're here to learn. And the way we get better at stuff is by teaching other people. That is the best way to learn something, is to teach it to someone else. If you can teach someone about something, you really know your stuff. And it's impressive, right? And you make a better salary. You feel better about yourself. You help other people. There's all these good, positive things that come out of the system. And all the design is pushing people towards those positive behaviors and pushing people away from the negative behaviors. So I came to this conclusion after I left Stack in 2012 was that what I did was I built massively multiplayer text-based games for other people to play. That's what I do. Not like Halo, but like it's a different kind of game with different goals, but it's very much a game. Which brings me to Discourse, which is my current project that we kind of launched in 2013. So I went through some changes at this point in my life. In 2009, sort of a year after Stack Overflow, Henry was born. He's now 7. And then a really big change in 2012. So this happened to me, right? And you're never really the same after seeing those faces, right? You could never be the same. So I knew my life was changing in very, very serious ways. And I had never thought about children. I mean, they were kind of invisible to me is what I'm saying to you. Like, I was an only child, so I didn't really have brothers and sisters growing up. And when I got to be an adult, I didn't really seek out children. If I saw children, I was like, well, that's a child. I don't really know what to do with a child. I'm a little scared of children because they're unpredictable. I don't understand them. So I kind of avoided them. But that's no longer an option when this happens to you, right? So you start saying, well, how do I understand what this is, right? And it's an amazing experience. But this book, I struggled with, like, what is being a parent? What do I do? How do I do this? And every first parent goes through this. That's the amazing thing about being a parent. It's like you have no clue what you're in for. No one can explain it to you. There's deep truth in that. You have to just do it to understand it. But this book is amazing. This is the one book I recommend to every parent I've ever will or have met. And it works on children between the age of 1 and 100. So a lot of the key insights, for example, with children is nobody tells you like how often your children are going to be just freaking out. I mean, it's crazy. Like every day, like I'm just working in my office. Like before I came here, I was sitting in my office and I was like, oh, screaming in the distance. That's normal. There's screaming in the distance. There's always screaming in the distance. You have children. So you get this and you're like, I'm an engineer, right? I'm a software developer. I solve problems. So when someone says to you, I'm super sad because my hair is heavy, I'm like, what do I do to fix your hair? Like, what do you do? My nose is smelly. I'm missing this balloon I got 6 months ago. And this may sound funny, but if you have kids, this is truth. This is the truth, right? This is what's going to happen. It's from a blog entry by Jason Good. If you search for 46 Reasons My 3-Year-Old, it's excellent. He has books as well. So one of the first things I learned is it's no longer about solving the problem. And this is really difficult for engineers to deal with, and I think particularly for men to deal with, because we rush to the problem-solving part of the story. We don't spend the time to understand it. We're like, let's just fix it. Just tell me what to do to fix it, right? So I want to play a video for you really quickly that I like a lot. So I should have audio for this.
There's all this pressure, And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking to...
Okay, so the key point there is like trying to fix things, right? That's what we're supposed to do. That's what I do as a programmer. That's what Stack Overflow is all about. It was like, don't come to us unless you have a problem, because why? What's the point of that, right? Where's the thing to solve? Well, to make this more serious, in this case, there's an obvious problem here, right? But a lot of times there's problems in life I can't fix for you. If you're a person of color and people follow you around in stores because they think you're going to steal stuff, I can't fix that for you, right? And my wife, who's a senior scientist, says she's in regularly meetings where people don't listen to her because she's a woman. And then they'll say the same thing she said, and it's a man. They're like, oh, yeah, definitely, we should do that. And she's like, what? So I haven't experienced that. Like, I'm a white guy who's basically rich. Like, I don't have those kind of problems, right? So part of what I'm trying to figure out is, like, how do you empathize? How do you understand the things that people are going through? And, how do you process them? Like, this is an old computer game, right? Like, it's very logical. It's very sensible. It makes sense. But people don't work that way, right? So teaching empathy is much harder. What I taught people at Stack was, like, how do you solve problems without noise, right? But here in discourse, I'm saying there's no problem to solve. We have to attack this a very different way. So if you look at forum software, which is uniformly terrible, one of the things that struck me about this, I've been on this particular site for more than 10 years. I've been using this site for 10 years, so I know these people, right? And it's about video games, and I love video games. But the thing that really struck me was this game of being on the forum was more fun than the games itself, and more enduring and more useful to me as a person. The games would come and go, but this community was always there. And the stories I would tell there were interesting, right? That's what I got out of it, more so than the games, was this community. So it's more reliable fun. This is the value we're trying to extract out of the situation, is these communities and the enduring values of these communities. So another idea when I started with discourse was that discussion is very serious. We're here to discuss serious things and have serious discussions, right? We want to, get to the real meat of the matter. And then as I got deeper into it and worked on the problem, I realized it wasn't about that at all. It was actually about having fun. The idea that you're in a discussion, you're in a place where you're hanging out and you're having these experiences has to be predicated on the fact that everybody there is having a good time and has a reason to be there. There's basically free beer and pizza at this party. So when you design a system like this, you have to explicitly design for fun. You want people to have a good time. Nobody comes to Stack Overflow and hopefully and says, I'm gonna, tell some funny joke, because that's not what we do at Stack Overflow. But on a discussion site, that is actually what we do. And whether it's a dinner party or something a little more crazy, then that's the kind of experience we're trying to build for. And the interesting thing about that is you don't get all the interesting conversations until you have people there because they're having a good time. So unless you have this fun, you'll basically have nobody to talk to. So one of the ways that I saw this working on one of our first sites, Boing Boing was one of our first partners for Discourse in 2013, was that they had a category called games. You can see it at the upper left there. And they started doing all these games. They would just play games with each other, right? They would just start these topics that had games, some of them very, very complicated. And I said to myself, wow, this is really working. That's the experience that you have to be here. It's not about solving the problem. First of all, it's about having a good time, being entertained socially with other people. So you have to design for that. And so there's this other really great book that I love called 59 Seconds. And one of the stories in this book is about people who are trying to deal with some negative experience that they've had. And they ran an experiment. They took two groups of people that had some seriously negative experience and said to group A, I want you to write about this. And they said to group B, I want you to talk about this with other people. And then they compared the results they got with these people. So what they found was that the group that wrote about their negative experience had much, much better outcomes. Whereas the people that just talked about what happened to them had no real significant change in their feeling about this negative thing that happened to them. And that is because when you write, you form a narrative. You tell a story about what happened to you. It's no longer, bad thing happened to me, and the world is cruel, and the world is unfair. It's like, well, this thing happened to me, and then I adapted. And then I did stuff to move past that, and I sought out these other paths that were in front of me. So this act of telling these stories is extremely human, right? It's how we have a narrative about what's happening to us. And that's the fundamental experience that we're trying to capture. So if you look at, this is another community site from Imager. It's a very, very active community. And I did a similar thing here where I said, okay, show me the top topics in the last quarter. So this is the quarter, the end of last year. And I looked at those to see how I felt about them. Because for Stack Overflow, one of my design principles for Stack Overflow is, how would I feel if every page was authored by me? Would I be happy, sad, embarrassed? upset, to me that's a metric of success. Every page there, I could say, I wrote this and feel good about it. And I think that's to some extent true here. And one of the stories I looked at here is a story of this one user who was really just struggling with cancer. So he's telling the story of getting on a cab ride, and the cabbie, I apologize, it's like a wall of text, but the cabbie refused to take his money. And he was so moved by this that he then turned around and said, hey, I want to make a donation. And, the most powerful thing on the slide is right there. It's the heart. That's the most powerful thing on the slide, is that this is his story. It's not a movie he saw. It's not some experience anyone can have. Experience is extremely unique to him. And walking beside him on the story is how we process it. So the good news is that he survived. He beat cancer, which was great. But he shared that story with us. And this idea of stories that change depending on the decisions you make in those stories is something that came up at another site that we host. It's called Choice of Games. I hadn't heard of this company. And their hosting site was blowing up to the point that it was causing problems for us. Like, we had to kind of nag them about what tier they were on and so forth. Like, why do you have so much traffic? And then I looked at them, and I realized they're a company that makes choose-your-own-adventure stories. They're a company about storytelling, right? This is so fundamental to what we're doing. It's like, obviously, your users are going to love this because that's what this is about. So it became very, very popular. And it also struck me that I, as a young reader, I used to read these books called the Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I loved them because first of all, they were early programming books because you made choices. It was like if branching statements. But also just, the fact that you controlled the story, it was about you. It was about you making these choices and then things happening in those stories as a result of those choices that you made. And there's a lot of these stories, right? And all of us are telling these stories. Each one of us is a book, and we're walking through these choices and making these choices. And I do have one piece of advice. One thing that's really stuck with me in choosing my own adventure is I really urge people, when you're looking at choices that are in front of you, try to pick the thing that makes you a little bit nervous when you're choosing something. Because I feel like you want to push yourself and you want to reach for goals that are just outside your ability. So try to make the choices, when you make these choices, that are a little bit harder and a little bit more difficult and make you a little nervous. So, as we've seen, discourse is about empathy, fun, and storytelling. And if we compare Stack Overflow, it was about civility, which is a different thing than empathy, very different. I used to have a lot of fights with Joel about this. Utility and practical problems. It's about things that can be solved with data, fact, and science. But when you deal with discussion, you're not dealing with data, fact, and science. You're dealing with the squishiness of being a person, which is a much harder problem. So another person that I love, and I've read all his books, and I recommend them unreservedly, is Dan Ariely. He has a book called Predictably Irrational, which is excellent. And they inform a lot of the design I do in the software that I build. So this particular book, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, is about cheating and stealing. And the experiment they ran, they had 450 participants. They paid them for some mundane task of how many forms they could fill out. It's a very mundane, routine task. And what they were really measuring was not how you did the task, but how much you cheated. They didn't tell them this, right? So they had two groups. For group A, they said, hey, here's your task. But before you do your task, I want you to think of 10 books you read in high school. They're like, okay, whatever. So then group B, same task, fill out these forms, make some money, depending on how many you fill out in the time. But first, recall the 10 commandments. And what's really striking is that group B, that recalled the 10 commandments, had almost no cheating. Whereas group A had sort of the normal amount of cheating. The book is really good. What's a normal amount of cheating is a secret that's revealed in the book, which I really urge you to read. I'm not going to spoil the surprise. They even ran it with a group of self-declared atheists where they had to swear on a Bible, and they're atheists, right? And they got the same no cheating results. So what this is telling us is that people want to do the right thing. People want to not steal. They want to not lie. They want to not cheat. But they have temptations. And you have to remind them of the good path and the right path at the time of the temptation. If you took an ethics class 10 years ago, it doesn't matter. It's not going to inform any decisions you make today. But if I said to you, before you do this, I want you to think about who you are as a person and what this means the decision you're going to make here, right? Then all of a sudden, you're like, whoa, now I have to confront, who am I? What kind of person does this make me if I do this? So with that in mind, I'm sure this is a classic. It's 386, of course. I have to remember the number. This is a classic, right? So you see something you don't like on the internet. And it makes you angry to some degree, right? To the point that you have to respond to it. So what we try to do at that point in discourse is say, okay, cool. You've started typing. So now, as you start typing, because I haven't seen you before, I'm going to remind you of a few things, okay? First of all, criticize the idea, not the person, right? And let's try to be kind to each other. And like, is this a good conversation? And that's it. Now go ahead, right? Now you're done. So the goal is to have that just-in-time reminder to do the right thing and be the kind of person that you want to be, not your emotions, not the type of person your emotions want you to be. And you can think about many situations where the same kind of just-in-time logic comes into play. Well, maybe you've posted a lot, but we don't know who you are. Well, we'd like to get to know you. You know, you've posted a fair bit, so hey, I would like to fill out your profile. That's cool, we like you. You're applying to the same person over and over. It's like, well, get a room, right? Or you're applying to the same topic a lot. Like you're just right on this topic, you know, and you're like a dog with a bone, right? Maybe take a break. Or maybe you're posting a link somebody else already posted up above. It's like, well, we've seen that link before, just so you know. Before you post that link, like it was posted 20 posts above where you are. Maybe you didn't read that. Or you're replying with a single word. So replying with a single word is a problem for me because on Discourse, our minimum character limit is 20, which I didn't think was that aggressive, but caused a lot of consternation in some areas of where they started using Discourse, which is open source, so anybody can use it. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. So I didn't spend a lot of time justifying this decision of why did you make the minimum 20 characters? You can always change it. And then we made a bunch of design changes to deal with this because people were so upset about this 20 character limit. But I feel like you can't tell a story that's just like yes, no, maybe. I mean, you got to use some words, right? Like we're not here to have a chat. We're here to tell me a story. That takes at least a sentence, right? So there's this just-in-time reminder at the time. You're like, oh, I just want to type something short, enter. It's like, well, hey, you can do that, maybe. But have you considered just using the heart button, right? If you just want to express, I really liked your stuff, then use the heart button. That's what it's for. So that's another kind of just-in-time reminder. Another aspect of design that I really believe deeply in is what I call making the things you want people to do should be easy. The things you don't want them to do should be hard, okay? It doesn't mean you can't do those things. A good example of this is on Stack Overflow where we have questions, answers, and comments. But there's all these restrictions on comments. And people are like, why did you put all these restrictions on comments? I can't have all these discussions that I want to have. And I'm like, that's the point. You're not supposed to have discussions here. That's why it's hard, right? That's why comments are limited to a certain number of characters. That's why the formatting is limited. That's why we only show 5 of them at any time. All these things are about putting the healthy food at eye level, which is stay focused on the questions and answers. Don't get tied up in discussion. So another thing that we do, and I'm sure you've seen this on a lot of sites where if you're on the site for a certain amount of time, they say, hey, why don't you join up, right? You've been here for more than a minute. So there's a couple design subtleties to this. One is, when do you do this? Do you do it immediately, like the minute user arrives, like, hey, welcome, sign up? Or do you say, well, let's wait a few minutes, let them read a little bit, and then say, hey, sign up for our site? The way we do this on Discourse is, again, it's a subtle decision, but I think a very important one. We put this at the bottom of the topic. So you have to read to the bottom, right? It's like reading is fundamental on Discourse. We want you to make it to the bottom where the rainbow ends, right? That's where the pot of gold is. Make it to the bottom of the conversation, read as much as you can. And then if you've done that, hey, you are our kind of people, right? You read the words that we put on the page. So we want you to be here, right? And only after you've read a few topics as well. So another gentle nudge, again, just in the right time, hopefully for the right kind of person. So reading. So I think one of the cruelest things the web ever did to people was the next page button, where I feel like if you get to the bottom, just show me the rest. If you're on page 1 of an article and you get to the bottom, why would you not go to page 2? Like, have that happen automatically, because reading is fundamental. Reading is listening, and you don't want to be in a conversation where somebody's talking all the time and not listening. These are the worst kinds of conversations. So a lot of thought and discourse went into how do we get people to read a lot? And the first answer was the next page button has got to go. Because if you're reading, I'm going to keep serving you up stuff to read. And I want you to keep going. You're doing the right thing. Another way that we don't interrupt your reading that always bugged me about a lot of traditional discussion software is once you start composing an answer, you're in composer land. And you're not in reading land anymore. I was like, well, wait a minute. When I'm composing a reply, I want to read all the things that people have said and synthesize that into a response. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but that's just how I do it, right? So I read and I write, and then I read some more, and I go, wait, what did he say there? And then, wait, wasn't this link? So I'm researching. I'm like writing and reading at the same time. So this composer doesn't interrupt your reading. You can even go to different topics, and it'll save your draft and all that stuff. It never interrupts your reading, even while you're writing. We're saying, please, keep reading. Even if you're writing, keep reading. And reading is a very, very difficult problem. It's like the big unsolved problem on the internet. It's like, how do you get people to actually read stuff, right? Versus clickbait, right? One weird trick. So this is a fun experiment Ars Technica did. It's called the banana experiment. The title of the article is Guns at Home More Likely to be Used Stupidly Than in Self-Defense. Now, I think the title is a little over the top, personally. I don't think they had to say stupidly, but the point is it's a gun control topic. I hope I don't have to explain to you why this is controversial, right? And then in the middle of the article, buried in the middle, they said, if you have read this far, please mention bananas in your comment below. We're pretty sure 90% of the respondents to this story will not even read this far. So it's a test, right? And they did it on the live site, which I think is awesome. So here's the comments. So there's the beginning of, you see that green line? That's the beginning of the comments. Let's go. All right, comments. Another page of comments. Still going. So finally, this person types the word bananas. After the discussion has gone on these are tiny pages, right? I don't know how many pages that would really be, 5, 7? And that was actually just something that was actually in the article as a test. Like, did you actually read the article? So, that's the challenge. How do you get people to read the article? We haven't actually cracked this, particularly not at Discourse. Like, one thing we've thought about doing is showing read time next to new users. Because one thing Steam does that I really like is when you're talking about a game, it says next to your name how long you played the game. So when someone says, this game sucks, and you see playtime of 15 minutes, you're like, well, okay. You know what you're dealing with, right? So it's a powerful thing. We're still playing with some of the dials there. But it's a really hard problem. So the other thing about conversations versus Q&A is Q&A is very reasoned. We want you to sit back, think, compose an answer, whereas conversations tend to be more rapid fire. I say this, you say this, I say this, you say this. Maybe it's like we're troubleshooting. Have you tried this? I tried that. Have you tried this? No, then this happened. Wait a minute, did you go back and do that? Did you double check this? It's this back and forth, right? This back and forth dynamic is really powerful in conversation because that's how conversation works. You expect it to be relatively speedy, if not immediate, right? It's not a chat system necessarily. We're still talking in sentences. But one way we do this in Discourse is we tried really hard to do a lot of live updates. Like the minute you see a reply, it'll just res in, right? It's all automatic. The minute somebody replies to you, you'll see a notification that happened, like as soon as we can, right? So you get that feeling of having this live conversation that feels more organic and more natural. Another thing we try to do is make it easy to do the right thing. And by here, it's like, well, I have this link and I want to discuss it. This is the entire basis of the site Reddit, right? It's evolved beyond that to some degree. But when Reddit started, it was post a link and we will discuss that link. So posting a link is kind of a pain because, like, well, then I have to visit the link. Is the URL tell me what it is? I mean, the web has gotten better about this. Like, the URL will kind of tell you what it is. But what you really want is for someone to summarize that link for you. It's like, well, just tell me what this is before I click on it, right? Before I kick this football that you're holding, I want to know what's going to be on the other side of the link. So we try to do that automatically for you. And there's these great technologies called Open Graph and OEmbed that are rapidly becoming standards on the web where you can kind of grab all this information and make it happen automatically. So you can have a good conversation, right? People can do the right thing by just pasting a link. They gave you a summary, so even if that site goes away, you will kind of know what used to be there at least. The other thing we want to do is reward people who stick around. This is very much like the show Cheers, where everybody knows your name, right? Because you're there all the time. And being there is so important to community. Being there, in fact, going back to my analogies of parenting, I would say 90% of being a parent is literally just showing up, consistently showing up with your child, right? Forget what you do. Are you there? Because if you're an absentee parent, you're not there for your child. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters at that point. So we want to encourage people to return, because people who return are people who are invested in your community, people who know what your community is about, people who know your lore, people who understand what your community is about, have read huge volumes of stuff on your site. So there's a lot of encouragement around badges for just showing up and doing more or less reading, basically reading in a nutshell. We don't actually incentivize posting that much. There's some stuff for it. And of course, you want to reward content, but I want to be careful about the way I talk about this, because you don't really want to reward posting, like I said. One mistake a lot of discussion software makes is the number they put next to the name. You'll notice in Discourse there are no numbers next to your name. Again, very intentional. But in a lot of traditional discussion software, there's a number next to your name, and that number is the number of times you have posted. So this incentivizes talking. The more you post, the more that number goes up. But I think a much more interesting number is read time, which is something we're playing with, showing more prominently. We record it for everything you do in Discourse. I can tell you how long every post was actually on your screen, because we track that, because reading is so important. So what we're rewarding here is the fact that you created stuff that other people liked, you know? You created a reply, that's great. You don't get a cookie for writing a reply, but you do get a cookie for writing a reply that 10 people liked. Again, this is about peer approval. It's not terribly different from Stack Overflow in that regard. We also encourage reciprocal likes. You know, if people are liking you and you're also liking other people, that's good. You're supposed to pay it forward. That's how this is supposed to work. If you're just absorbing likes and not giving any, is that good? I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but I'm not going to give you a badge for it. And of course, sharing content, because people have to find our community for it to grow. So I think the root point of all this, the point I'm trying to make, is where Q&A was really competitive. I mean, it's collaborative a little bit, but it's competitive in the sense that you want the best answer, you want to provide the best answer. And the answers are kind of competing with each other. There's more than one way to do it. Every programmer understands this. Nobody's going to criticize you for having the third highest voted answer on the page. It's not wrong. It's just another alternative answer that's also good. But it's still kind of a competition. You voted up and it goes above another answer, right? There's an ordering here. The ordering says everything you need to know about that system, right? It's a competition at some level for good reasons, right? With positive outcomes, but we're competing in hopefully a healthy way. So on Discourse, we're not competing. It's collaboration. We're sitting around the campfire telling stories and blowing each other's minds with these amazing stories that we told, right? And that's what we're trying to reward, is reciprocation. So you'll see the first, if you go to the user page on Discourse and compare it with the user page on Stack Overflow, you know, you're seeing reputation, sorted by reputation. Who got the most reputation this week? Here we're saying, well, who gave the most love this week? Who received the most love this week? Those are the values that we want to encourage and want to have in Discourse. So I think my summary here is, like, Q&A and discussion are so radically different things. I didn't understand how different they were until we got really deep into Stack Overflow, probably a couple years in, 3 years in probably. And they are almost really opposing goals at some level. The more free-form discussion you have, the less learning you can have. You can only tolerate a certain amount of discussion before the whole thing breaks down. But on the discussion side, you can layer some Q&A on top of it. It's a system you can build on. It's a much more general system of interaction online. So you can layer some Q&A on top of your discussion. It doesn't hurt anything, but you can't reorder answers. Like, you can't say, I'm going to now restructure the discussion to show you who had the best contribution to this discussion. That would be so crippling and so corrosive to community, to have any kind of sorting change. In fact, when I talked to Joel about this, he was nervous. He's like, are you going to build something that competes with Stack Overflow? I was like, well, I'm not an idiot. Why would I do that, right? First of all. But second, no, because, you know, you can't do that. You know, discussions don't work that way. There is no such thing as the best opinion. You know, that's, even introducing the concept would be just fatal to the design of the system. So the second thing is building these habits with the nudges, where you nudge in a just-in-time manner about these collaborative, uplifting things that you want people to do, you know? And you're teaching them. You're saying, these are the things you will get rewarded for. And they're all positive, collaborative behaviors, not competitive. We're not competing to see who can tell the best story. We're singing a song. This song is going to go on until we die. And you'll have a verse, I'll have a verse, they'll have a verse, and we all sing it. And it goes on. So I still think it's helpful to think of these things as games, right? We're all playing games. That's the other cool thing about kids is like they have fun like wired into their DNA. They can't not have fun. It's the first thing you learn about a kid is like that's what they're there for. They're there to have fun. So I think we want to embrace that. I love the game-like aspects of both of these systems, of Stack Overflow and of discourse. And I think we should play. We should play. We should move fast, and we should try to have fun together, and hopefully learn from each other. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Jeff. Would you like to ask a few questions?
Oh, sure. Q&A?
Okay. Yeah, a little Q&A over here.
Sure.
If that's all right.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, we got a nice comfy couch and everything, so you can, relax, fall asleep a little
I'm
bit.
going to eat 6 donuts.
No, they've been sitting here all day, these poor donuts. There's actually little waffle things here, too. I didn't see that. There's no maple syrup, though. Thank you. That was actually, I think there was great timing, too, right, in the context of Susan's talk right before about psychology and the impact we have through our decisions, and here it is applied. We're talking about trying to influence certain behaviors. One of the things I was really curious about, when Twitter changed their icon from like the star to the heart, there was like this big blowout on Twitter, right? Because the symbol matters to a lot of people. There's social
right.
norms that follow that. So how much experimentation or research goes into some of these decisions that you're using? When you're talking about, for example, suggesting using the heart icon, how much time was spent thinking about the symbol and what it represents?
A fair bit. I mean, to me, love is the easiest concept to grasp and the easiest concept to get people to rally behind. Some people actually do get nervous about it, like, well, heart, I'm not comfortable loving things. And I'm like, well, maybe you should be. I don't think it should be a big deal to give love, right? And think about the thumbs up. Like, say somebody posts this story about their dog that dies. That's really profound, really sad story. You're going to like that story? You're going to thumbs up that story? Whereas if you put a heart on it, it's like, well, my heart goes out to you. It's a much more general expression of caring. And so I was always super comfortable with it. I thought it made total sense. And there were a few topics if you go to Meta Discourse where we discuss all this stuff, there are some topics about it, but I never found any criticism of particularly compelling. And I really support what Twitter did because the star was already super ambiguous. Am I rewarding you with a star? Am I giving you a star? Is it a favorite?
Sure.
That's a struggle I don't think people should have to have.
Okay. So Meta Discourse, is that available is that where you internally
That's where we
discuss some of
design the
these
software.
decisions?
Yeah, so if you have opinions about discourse or how it works, come to Meta and talk with us about it.
Okay. It would also be interesting just to read some of the threads about some of these decisions that you had talked about there, I think. One of the things that was really interesting, because it was a question that was coming up, was going to be how do you find these leaders in the community? Like as you're just starting, trying to build that, cultivate that community, and there's a human touch to that in identifying who's doing the contribution. And it looks like your approach so far has been to try and automate that reward system as much as possible. Is there a situation where you would dive in a more like personal human touch and recognize that somebody here needs, is doing excellent work and it should be a leader in that community and sort of nudging them in that direction? And how do you identify those people if so?
Well, one of the things we struggle with at Discourse is that it's hard to launch communities. Anyone can launch a blog, and if you're very talented and you write for 6 months to a year, you will have a following on your blog. You will be successful. But communities take a group of people to succeed. So a lot of the thinking that we put in Discourse is like, how can we get people, first of all, can they even install our software? Can they understand what it is? Can they install it? Really low bars, like we got to get past those bars first. But now we're getting to the third bar, which is how do we help them be successful? Launch a community that actually works, that people actually go to, that has content, that has reasons for people to show up there. So I think there's a lot of thinking that goes into essentially kind of more or less automating that. Like, for example, one thing you mentioned that we want to do but we haven't done yet is, and we did this on Stack, when a new user comes in and does well, posts and gets a lot of likes and participates, you send them basically a rookie award. You don't call it that, but it's like, hey, awesome, you came in here and really stirred things up in a good way, and like people are responding to what you're posting, so thanks. And I think that should be automated to some degree because it just helps your community be successful.
Sure. And on the opposite end of that, how do you identify, how do you keep track of if a community seems to be evolving in the wrong direction? Like how do you notice that? Is it through these metrics that you're looking at, or are there other indicators that you should be aware of, like that signals that maybe you need to intercept in some way, that things are going in the wrong direction?
Well, tone is difficult. I mean, because some communities want weird tones. I mean, it's hard to judge. the way communities work. But I think one metric I always look at is, are you losing more people than you're gaining? Because any community that doesn't have an influx of new people is dead long term. It's just a matter of time at that point. So if the community becomes so weird and so insular and so cliquish or rude, or pick your poison, that everybody's like comes there and is like, I'm out of here, this place sucks, then you're not going to survive.
Sure.
I think the warning I would, the algorithmic way I would detect that is say, look, you don't have any new users coming in here. This is a problem, and you haven't had any consistent new users for a period of months.
Sure.
So, and we have broad generic advice about like how to, like the universal rules of what we call civilized discourse, which is essentially be nice to other people and really listen to them. Really listen to what they're saying. But I think that would be my main strategy, is making sure there's an influx of new people, because that can fix a lot of stuff. Just
Sure.
having new people come in can fix a lot of stuff.
So this talk and a lot of the things were very specific to online discussion, but this level of consideration for influencing the right behaviors and encouraging users in the right direction, it's equally applicable whether you're e-commerce or anything else, correct?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was very good. It was a great way to end the day, I think.
All right,
Fantastic.
great.
Yeah.
I hope it was useful. Thank you.